Evening. Hope you're doing well. Glad you're with us. If you're visiting with us, you're an honored guest. Glad you're here, for sure. All right. This is one of those topics where, I would so much rather talk about this in a Bible class setting. But it's going to be hard to do that with the way we're going through the books of the Bible and things in both of our classes. So this is what we're going to have to settle for here. I suppose that there is as much curiosity about demons as there is about angels, and we wonder about these things, and there's a lot of stories told about them, and it's almost as if all the information out there about angels and demons and are not really biblical, it seems like, with just a little bit of truth thrown in there, but then we have all of these fanciful ideas about it. And actually in some conversations in the past few months or so, this subject of demons has been brought up, and so I thought that it would be good to talk about it. And since we're not going to do a back and forth tonight, it would probably, if some of this sparks some questions about this subject that I don't get to, and surely that's going to happen, right? Sure, you're going to have a question after this. Then definitely drop it in the box, come up to me, ask me, write it down, give it to me, and we'll address it. We'll address it later. Of course, the big thing about demons, I guess, is what a lot of people know about. Well, there's that movie, right? The Exorcist that came out in the '70s, and I guess that's where this fascination with demons really took off. And they say that exorcising demons, Catholic priests do that, and they say they do that, and they say that it can be very dangerous. And they actually advise that priests have adequate insurance before they go into a home and attempt such things, because I guess they could get hurt and they need to have insurance to pay their hospital bills or whatever like that. But really, that's the thing. Better have insurance if you're going to go exorcise a demon. And apparently, it's just as dangerous for the one with the demon as it is for the one trying to get the demon out of them. I ran across a story about a 3-year-old girl. This happened in 2022. And a 3-year-old girl, a baby really, and from California, was found dead after her relatives tried to exorcise a demon from her, and they did it by choking her, and a lot of awful details that I don't really rather not share with you, but they were trying to get her to throw up. And they thought if she would throw up, then the demon would come out with it, and they ended up killing her, and rightly so. They were all charged with felony child abuse, and some of them are facing life in prison for it. And so when you read things like that, and when I say we should know the truth about this subject, I mean, really, it's pretty important, because in that particular case in 2022 in California, if they had known the biblical truth about it and they believed the biblical truth about demons, that wouldn't have happened. That would not have happened. I mean, some young kids cry at night. Sometimes they wake up crying, and it doesn't mean they've got a demon in them. And so understanding the truth about this subject, it matters. And in some cases, obviously it's life or death. So those who really want to know the truth about it, they're not going to go watch The Exorcist. They're not going to take their information from the movies. And certainly, I think a very bad place to get your information about demons is going online and seeing what everybody has to say about their own personal experience with it or whatever like that. Rather, we should go to the Bible. Really, that's the answer for everything. You want to go to the Bible and see what the Bible has to say about it. So what does the Bible say about demons? Now, again, don't be disappointed in me if I don't get, you probably have a question already in your head, and I might not get to it. So don't shoot me with the Nerf gun. By the way, thanks for not going to get those Nerf guns in the back. I appreciate that. Don't get mad at me if I don't get your question answered tonight. And really, the truth is that just like angels, the Bible really doesn't say a whole lot about it, and that's almost dangerous for people with who are kind of curious about religious things, because when you don't have a lot in the Bible, we think, well, there's got to be more about it, and that's what causes us to kind of run with these stories and almost make stuff up and embellish these things that we've heard, and we really go the wrong way with that. So it's been said that God is as wise in his reservations as he is in his revelations. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that saying. So what are demons? But let's start with this. First, we do want to note that they do exist. They are a thing. In James chapter 2, verse 19, James says, "You believe in one God, you do well. Even the demons," or the King James says, "even the devils believe and tremble." Now, I think James is being a little bit of using a little bit of sarcasm here, but it's not only sarcasm. James, when he writes this, he is acknowledging the existence of beings called demons or devils. Now, his letter was one of the earliest that was written of the New Testament. Probably that, maybe some would say that's the earliest book of the New Testament that we have. And so, with that being said, you're looking at about maybe 15 years or so after Christ's life, and it was in Jesus's day where we find all of these recordings, these written recordings of demons interacting with men and women. Now, there's this theory out there that Jesus and the apostles just pretended to cast out demons, and of course we don't believe that at all. There's another theory that says, well, Jesus and his apostles, they were just as ignorant as everybody else in those days were, and they believed they were casting out demons, but they weren't actually doing it. So they had been duped in some way and just believing that they could actually do it. And of course we don't believe that. And then the skeptics are going to add on to that and say, well, the gospel accounts that you're reading, your Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that's a bunch of garbage in it. That's as real as Huckleberry Finn is. And of course, we don't believe that, of course. And so demons, Satan, they are real beings. And if they are not, folks, I want you to know that it just throws you might as well throw the whole Bible out if they are real, because the Bible speaks as if they are real beings. And if Jesus is saying that they're real, then and they're not, then Christianity's got a big problem. So they're real. Secondly, demons are spirits. So I guess the kids would be happy to know that they're not the monsters in your closet. That's not what they are. Demons are not the strange sounds that are coming from your basement or your attic or whatever it is. They don't live in the hills and eating dead animals and things like that. They're not your skinwalkers or your chupacabras or anything like that. They are spiritual beings, just like angels are. And this is interesting. If you want to turn over to Matthew 8. The Bible uses the word demon and spirit interchangeably, and so I want you to see this for your own eyes. Matthew 8 and verse 16. Here's what it says. When evening had come, they brought to, that's Jesus, him, many who were demon-possessed. And he cast out the demons with a word. That's not what it says in your Bible, does it? No, it says spirits. So they brought to him people who were demon-possessed, and then it says he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. Well, see how they're being used interchangeably there? So we might say this, that not all spirits are demons, but all demons are spirits. And in fact, in Luke chapter 8 and verse number 2, we're told that they are evil spirits. And so there's we're getting a distinction between those kind of spirits and other, maybe let's say, angelic spirits. Now, so what exactly are there? I guess there's two ideas worth considering about what they are. And I'll throw these out there and I'll tell you which one I think, and then you can be your own judge on it. One idea is that they are spirits of very, very wicked, very evil people who have died and gone on. Now, it's interesting to know that some of the Jews of Jesus' day, most really, held this view that demons were real, obviously, but they were also people who had once lived on earth. Now, Josephus, you've heard me bring up the name of Josephus before. He's a man, he's a historian, Roman historian, a Jewish historian. Was kind of a traitor of sorts. But he lived in that time, and we get a lot of extra biblical information from him. He was not inspired, but the things that he says kind of give us a good look into what the people were believing in some historical accounts, and it's good to read some of his works. Well, Josephus says this, quote, and remember, this is not inspired, it's not from the Bible. Demons are no other than the spirits of the wicked, that is wicked people, that enter into men and kill them unless they can obtain some help against them. Now, that view was held by most people in those days, but we know not everybody held that view, because we can read in the book of Acts chapter 23 and verse number 8, where this group of Jews called the Sadducees, they didn't believe in angels and they didn't believe in spirits. They didn't believe in the resurrection either, by the way. And so if they didn't believe in angels, they didn't believe in spirits, then I'm not so sure how they could even believe in demons either. Maybe they did. I would like to guess that they did. So not everybody held this view. Now, a problem with this idea is that whether a person, it doesn't matter how they live, whether they live wickedly or whether they live the most righteous life they could possibly live, when they die, they leave this earth and they do not return. And I'm convinced the Bible teaches that across the board. They don't return in any way, shape, or form. When you go to, we won't read this, but I want you to read on your own time. Please mark this down, Ecclesiastes 9, 5, and 6. And it says there, the dead know nothing. The dead know nothing. And they don't have any part of anything that is done under the sun, that is, on the earth. They don't have a part in it at all. And so that's an interesting verse you would want to read. And then when you look at Luke 16, in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Right, you remember the rich man and Lazarus, they die and they go to this spiritual realm, and Jesus is telling this story, and the rich man wants to come back, doesn't he? And and was he allowed to come back? He was not. He was not allowed to come back. And so when we leave this earth, we're done with this earth for good. Now we can't say this without bringing this up in 1 Samuel chapter 28, where there we have a case of Samuel the prophet. After he had died, he comes and he appears. Not only does he appear to a woman after he had died, but he actually spoke. It seems like from the text, he audibly speaks to King Saul. Again, that's 1 Samuel 28, 7, starting in verse 7 there. But I think that's I guess we would call him an exception to the rule. And plus, Samuel was no demon. He's one of the most faithful prophets that you read about in the Bible. And he certainly wasn't jumping in the body of anybody and possessing them. So he's kind of an outlier, I guess we could say. Now, if I were to ask you, could God allow the spirits of evil people to come back to this earth after they died? I suppose that if God wanted that to happen, he's got the power to do it. He could allow that to happen. But we just don't read about it happening in the Bible. And I think maybe and this goes for a lot of subjects, where I think we need to take that serious. I think that's very important. When you don't read about something in the Bible, I mean, how much liberty do we have to just kind of just run off on our thoughts and our ideas and our theories and things like that about something that we really don't know a lot about? Now, the other idea, which to me makes more sense, is that demons are fallen angels. Now, Jude chapter 1, there's only one chapter, but I think it's right to say, it's still chapter 1, right? Jude 1 and verse 6 talks about, and we'll read this later, talks about angels leaving their abode, which would be heaven, and they are now in chains. So obviously, being in chains, you're not doing that for good. You don't get put in chains for good behavior. They're there for some kind of punishment, for some type of sin that they did, some sort of transgression against God. And in Matthew 25 and verse 41, Jesus is talking about the devil, and he says the devil and his angels, as if they belong to him. And so it seems like Satan, our adversary, has his helpers, his ministers, his servants, his angels, and I'm going to say they're his demons, just as God has his servants and his ministers, his spiritual helpers, if you want to call them that way, which are angels. And you can see that in Hebrews 1 in verse 14, I think. It's the very last verse in the chapter. So they're real, and I think that's more plausible, that the demons are fallen angels. And of course, you can fact check me on it, and I'd love to talk about it more. I really would with you. So just as demons are real, Now, let's talk about demon possession for a moment. The possessions were real. The ones we read about in the Bible, they were the real deal. Now, to shrug this off, our skeptic friends are going to say things like, the things that were described, and not only in the Bible, which is an ancient writing, but they'll say maybe other ancient writings that have this kind of thing in there. They were just afflictions and sicknesses and diseases that the people didn't understand. And so they're just kind of throwing their hands up and say, we have no idea what this is. We've never seen this before. We'll just call it a demon. And they say, well, see, it's not actually demons. They just didn't know what to say. And so they just attributed it to demon possession. And then they'll say something like the Bible writers, well, they didn't really have the right language to use. They didn't know what to say. And so they just used kind of accommodative language to describe the things that they saw because, well, they just didn't know. They just didn't know what to write down, and they didn't know any better. But I don't like that. I don't like that theory. That's like saying the Bible writers were just a bunch of idiots. And I don't think they're a bunch of imbeciles. They knew the difference. Turn over to Matthew 4 if you want to. They knew the difference between a disease, somebody being sick, and some crazy supernatural thing taking place. I think it's safe to say they knew the difference. So in Matthew 4, verse 24. Matthew chapter 4, verse 24, here's what it says. Then his fame, this is Jesus, his fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought to him all sick people. Now notice this category of people. All sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments. And those who were demon-possessed, epileptics, or you might see the word lunatics there, with a K, and paralytics, and he healed them. You see how there's different categories of people here? You got people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments. Now, our skeptic friends would say, well, that's demon possession. Then it says, and those who were demon-possessed. Well, that's a different kind of category. Right? Mark 1 in verse 34 kind of gives us the same idea there. It says, then he healed many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And so if these Bible writers and the people who lived in that day, if they were not able to tell the difference between a disease and a demon possession, why were they writing like they did? Like they could tell the difference, right? The truth is that they could. They did. They distinguished between the two. So where did the demons come from in the New Testament? All right. Well, if we say that demons, let's go ahead and just grant to me that demons are fallen angels that has sinned. Then they're going to have to be the same group of spiritual beings that Peter talks about as being reserved for judgment. Remember Jude 1 in chains, and then in chains, and then 2 Peter 2 and verse number 4 talks about them being reserved for judgment. So let's read that real quick. 2 Peter chapter number 2 and verse. I have this up here. There we go. Verse 4. It says, "For God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment." Now, that word hell that's used there, you're going to read in the Gospels Jesus talking about hell. You're going to see the English word hell there. But this is not the same Greek word for hell as Jesus used. Peter uses the Greek word Tartarus, Tartarus, and this is obviously, if you just read the verse again, you'll see that this is some kind of holding place. It's a waiting place, right? Because they are being reserved for judgment. And so the idea is when the final everlasting hell, when the everlasting hell is being discussed, that's not what we're talking about here, but when the everlasting hell is being discussed, as Jesus talks about it, you're always going to see the word Gehenna. And there's a good word study on Gehenna, and maybe we can do that at another time. So this Tartarus is the other side. And I think makes good sense that this is the other side of the great gulf that is fixed in place that you read about in Luke chapter 16. This is the same kind of hell, the torments that the rich man opened up his eyes in, and he was so thirsty, and he just wanted a cool drop of water on his tongue, right? So Jude 1 and verse 6 says, and the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but they left their own abode, God has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. So if these angels that Peter talks about are demons, and I think they were, and they were in chains of some sort, well, how in the world did they get out to possess people that we read about in the New Testament? Well, I mean, I guess the easy answer is God let it happen. And if there's a more detailed answer, I don't have it. God had to have let this happen. Now, I know the book of Revelation is, and you gotta be real careful when you bring it up, Revelation, because that book is really, really abused and is highly misunderstood. And so when you're going there to kind of figure something out, you just got to be careful. And so I know it's figurative language, and I know that Revelation is filled with visions, all right, that John saw. But in Revelation, in verse number 9, there's a vision where by God's power, by God's will, certain things are let out of what the text calls a bottomless pit. And you go to verse 20, we see Satan being let loose from this, and he gets out, and Satan gets to do his thing. Now, there's really no direct link from the book of Revelation to the Gospels about demons or whatever, but the point is that for Christians to have to be able to understand what John was writing to them and telling them about these things being let out of this bottomless pit, to understand what John's talking about, they would have had to know that God has the power to allow whomever or whatever to do whatever God's will is, to do whatever God wants. And so if demons were possessing people in the New Testament, and they were, and demons were at one point isolated to a place in Tartarus, and they were in chains, and they couldn't get out on their own, and that makes sense, then the only answer is, folks, God let them out. God had to allow it. Now, if that's true, then your big question is, God, what are you doing? Why did you do that to people? Well, I think when we answer why God let this happen, we're going to answer why this kind of stuff is not happening today. It's not. It's just not going on today. Now, the only time you read about demons possessing people is in the New Testament. I think that is significant. If they had always been doing this, there would have been something said about in the Old Testament, but you don't see it. It's very significant that, is it coincidence that just when Jesus comes on the scene, and Jesus comes to the earth, that we're reading about all of these demon possessions? It's not coincidence at all. There's nothing in the Old Testament about it. Every time you read in the Gospels a list of things that Jesus and his disciples were going around doing, casting out demons was usually one of those things. And even after Jesus had died and he had resurrected, he's appearing to his disciples, demons were still around. They didn't just disappear just like that. So you read in Mark's account of the Great Commission in Mark 16 and verse 17. He says, he's talking to his disciples, and he says, and these signs will follow those who believe. In my name, they will cast out demons and speak with new tongues. And then verse 18 goes on to describe all of these other miracles. And so now what was the point of all of those miracles that the people who believed were going to do in those days? Why were these signs, these miracles to be done? Verse 20 of Mark 16 tells you, it says, and they went out and they preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word through the accompanying signs. And so casting out these demons from people was just one of the many miracles that a disciple could perform to confirm the word, the gospel truth that they were sent out to preach and speak to other people. And that makes a lot of sense. You're going out, you're speaking this new gospel, and you're trying to get people to listen to you and hear the truth. And then they say, well, how do we know this is really from God? Well, bring your brother over here who's suffering from this disease, and I'll heal him. And then you can decide for yourself whether what I'm talking about is from God or I'm just making it all up. Well, it would have been very convincing, right? And Jesus said the point of it is to confirm the word. Now, from what we know, God allowed demon possession to start taking place in the days of Jesus Christ. Well, we could say probably a little bit before Jesus came, leading up to Jesus' birth at least. And then it continued on until the confirmation of the truth of the gospel was no longer needed. And then when you got the whole completed revelation and everything God wanted to give mankind was given, and there's no need to confirm anything anymore, then why do you need the confirming signs? You wouldn't. Demon possession was one of those, and so you don't need that anymore. Or casting out demons. In Mark chapter 1, Jesus commanded a demon to come out of a man, and when the people saw it, they were like, they were amazed. Mark 1:27, they were all amazed. And so they questioned among themselves, saying, what is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him. And then listen, verse 28. And immediately his fame, Jesus' fame, spread throughout all the region around Galilee. Well, guess what? That was the plan. That is exactly what God wanted to happen. And it makes sense to say that if the miracle of casting out demons went away, so too with demon possession, especially considering that it was God who was the one who allowed it to happen in the first place. In the book of Zechariah, in the Old Testament, chapter 13, it talks about this. Verse 1 kind of sets the scene. Zechariah, what time period are you talking about? Well, verse 1 tells us, he says, in that day, a fountain shall be opened for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanness. And so there's no doubt, no one argues that he's prophesying about the days of Jesus Christ. This is the days when Jesus would offer living water to everyone, and people's sins would be forgiven, and the church was going to be established and things like that. So we know what time period Zechariah is talking about. So in verse number 2, he says, it shall be in that day, says the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, and they shall no longer be remembered. I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirits to depart from the land, or the unclean spirit, singular. So he prophesies about a day when the unclean spirit, evil spirits, and what I'm saying is that's demons, they would be no more. And not just wiping them out of existence, but ceasing to exist among the living. They would be departing from the land. And folks, I'm telling you, that happened. That happened. Christ has come, and he has gone back to heaven. And we've got God's completed word. It's all the revelation that we're ever going to get and all the truth that we're ever going to need. And there's no need for demons to be cast out anymore, because that was specifically to confirm the word, confirm who Jesus was. Well, we know. I got this right here. I don't need to see a demon. I don't need to see an exorcism to know that Jesus is who he said he was in the Bible. And so that isn't, casting out is not needed anymore, then neither is the possession, and God's not going to allow anymore what he once did, because that purpose was fulfilled, and that's over with. Those days are over with. Now, there's a lot more observations about demons that we could make, but let's end with this. There's something I think really odd about saying that a Christian today has something in common with a demon, and in that the Christian and the demons, they both believe in God. And of course, this is not something you want to go around bragging about, saying, well, I got something in common with the demons. Hey, well, you kind of actually do. That's James 2 and verse 19. However, that's where it's got to stop. You should have no more similarities. You should have nothing more in common with demons. Jesus said that an everlasting fire is going to be prepared, not for you. It was prepared for the devil and his angels. Matthew 25, verse 41. So look, the devil has his servants, just as God has his. They follow their master. They think on the kinds of things that their master thinks on, Satan, and they desire the same kind of things that he does. And when a person chooses to live in sin, when you choose to disobey God, when you choose to be a complacent Christian, when you choose to rebel against God's authority, I don't know how we're any better than those beings who serve God's ultimate enemy. Romans chapter 6 and verse 16 says, do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one's slaves to whom you obey? I don't want any other master than Jesus Christ. But if I don't live for him, I've got the worst master of all. So demon possession or anything supernatural connected with demons, folks, the Bible teaches that they're not happening today. And you say, well, if you say that, you're taking away all what's behind all of this evil and wickedness that's going on today. I don't think so. I don't believe that at all. I'm not taking away the truth that there is a wickedness and an evil that has a lot of power over the world today. And I don't think it bothers Satan one bit that things aren't like they used to be in the New Testament. Because you and I would both agree to this, I bet, that Satan doesn't need demons to possess people, to win them over. Because we are already so full of ourselves, we can barely fit anybody else in. And when people are so full of themselves as they are today, and making themselves their own God, that's all that Satan is ever going to need to keep people in a lost condition. But I'll speak for myself, but I would like to think that I speak for most of us here anyways, that we are going to be determined to not let that happen to us. God is going to rule our lives. Christ is going to determine our steps, and we are going to walk in the Spirit, Romans 8 and verse number 1. Because if we do anything less than those things right there, we're going to end up joining our adversary and all his little servants in everlasting punishment. I ain't going there. And I don't want anybody else to go there either. If there's someone here who has not obeyed the gospel, as the Bible teaches to obey the gospel, then I hope you would at least consider it. I hope that piques your interest. I hope you want to know more about what I mean by that. Because there is a gospel plan of salvation. There's a pattern, there's a form of doctrine that has been delivered to us that we need to obey. That's Romans 6 and verse 17. Romans 6, verse 3 and 4. So if you're unsure if you've obeyed the gospel, then, I hope you better grab me. Grab somebody here and ask about that. Maybe you have obeyed the gospel, but you need to repent of some sins that's been in your life. Maybe you need to ask God for your forgiveness. Maybe you need to ask somebody for forgiveness. You've been holding that back as well, and that's not good. And so if there's anything standing between you and God this evening, I hope you'll make it right. If you need anything at all whatsoever, please see us before you leave so we can help you. Let's grab our songbooks and let's stand together and sing together.